Thomas was born and raised in a village whose locals had to work from a young age. Young people preferred to spend their free time in a drunken binge, and the boy preferred to live like everyone else and just go with the flow. One day after another party, he realized the awfulness of the situation and how hopeless his future looked. He decided to go to the city because there was at least a chance to get a high-paying job. Of his relatives, the boy had only his grandmother, but she happily blessed her grandson. She kissed him goodbye on the forehead, crossed him, and put a handkerchief with a small amount of money in it. The city stunned the country simpleton, for everywhere was very noisy and bustling. Those around them were in a hurry and did not look each other in the eye at all, preferring to ignore the questions they asked. The boy felt incredibly lonely, but he had a plan of action worked out long ago. He took a crumpled newspaper from his pocket, on the pages of which the ads for rooms he was interested in were circled in advance. As a result, he found himself in a dormitory, and the area of the room was divided by thin drywall walls. The price for housing was minimal, which suited the guy just fine. He decided to put up with the inconvenience for a while, and in the near future to look for a better option. In the evening, he got to know his neighbors, who turned out to be a couple of young guys. They were considerably tipsy, and several bottles of vodka made them feel optimistic. The coven continued into the morning, but Thomas chose to abstain from alcohol. The new acquaintances promised to help him with his job search, and the boy politely thanked him for the tempting offer. For the next few days, Thomas diligently bypassed potential employers. Everywhere he was turned down, and even as a loader, no one was willing to hire the newcomer. Only an old man took pity on him and agreed to pay a small wage to clear the construction debris from the site. Money was melting away in front of my eyes, and I could not find a suitable job. Soon the deadline to pay the rent was approaching, which forced Thomas to step up. He agreed to become an apprentice at a nearby construction site, where for a week he hand-mixed concrete and hauled bricks. The perks were a free lunch, but the foreman nagged at every little detail and waved foul language at the young guys. The result was the accusation that the guy was doing a bad job and would not get even a ruble. Thomas returned to the dormitory, where his neighbors were humming behind the wall. He decided to drop in on them, as he felt sick and depressed. He told his buddies about his unsuccessful attempts to earn money, and they looked at each other slyly and offered to make some easy money. The business was illegal, which the friends warned him about. Silence about what they had seen and heard was a prerequisite. Thomas might soon be homeless, so he agreed. All he had to do was to stand guard and wait for his buddies, who were to visit a debtor. Thomas stayed up all night trying to negotiate with his own conscience. He was well aware that he was being asked to be a party to a crime. Everything seemed harmless, so he decided to try to get the money and to quit such machinations. He even asked God for help, but quickly came to his senses and stopped calling on the powers of the Almighty. On the appointed day and hour, the friends found themselves outside a luxurious mansion. The lads quickly swung over the fence, while Thomas stayed behind to observe the situation. Suddenly sirens sounded, police cars and men in black masks appeared. In such a situation, the only thing left to do was to obey commands unquestioningly and not resist. An alarm went off in the house, and the hapless thieves even managed to escape, and all the members of the group were apprehended. Thomas honestly told investigators the story of his adventures in the big city. Investigators listened to such tales every day, so there was no leniency. The court ordered him to serve his sentence, and while the grandson was in prison, his grandmother died. After his release, Thomas again experienced a déjà vu effect. He was again alone in the big city, with no money and no hope for a better future. The boy drove to the village and visited his grandmother's grave. He made a promise not to deal with criminals, and he was determined to keep it. The house was in a deplorable condition and uninhabitable, so the guy returned to the city. He got by on odd jobs, but not enough to live on. No one wanted to do business with the ex-convict, and many treated the guy with contempt and apprehension. It got to the point where he himself felt like a complete nobody who had no place in the world of normal people. Thomas set up a small hut on the bank of the river, and his shelter was securely concealed from prying eyes. One day, he heard desperate cries for help, which made him quit his business. There were 3 hysterical girls standing on the bank, pointing to the water. Someone was drowning there, so the guy didn't hesitate to rush out to help. In a few seconds, he covered the distance, and then helped the man out on dry land. The drowning victim was a pretty girl. She had not swallowed any water, but she was frightened and was sobbing profusely. Thomas gave the pretty girls a quick glance and chose to leave. The young ladies were fashionably dressed, and their appearance clearly indicated that they belonged to the golden youth. He had dealt with such people before, and knew that there was usually trouble after dealing with them. He had saved the man, but he had no moral satisfaction at all. It was as if he had been doused in a garbage can again, and had to return to his dark hole. In the morning, the workman showed Thomas a newspaper in which journalists had written about the miraculous rescue of the daughter of a local oligarch. Witnesses talked about the young man, who didn't even have time to thank them for their courage. A couple of days later, several expensive black SUVs showed up at the pre-factory site, causing excitement and commotion at the plant. Thomas was urgently summoned by the foreman, and the guy prepared for another layoff. There was a girl in the office who only glimpsed the guy and nodded affirmatively. The man in the expensive suit approached the boy and handed him the envelope, then thanked him and shook his hand. The father of the young woman had hired detectives to follow the man and find him. The girl also said some pleasant words and suggested we go for a walk that evening. Thomas was so dumbfounded that he suddenly agreed. He felt at ease with her, and while talking with her, he completely forgot his problems and troubles. Their relationship was condemned by many, but the lovers no longer cared about the opinion of others. About a year later, the wedding took place because the bride's father gave his blessing. He was tired of fighting with his daughter and trying for a long time to convince her of the error of her choice of a life partner. Things had been going well for the boy lately, because love had given him strength and confidence. His father-in-law paid for most of the wedding expenses, but the gorgeous diamond ring and the outfit for the future wife were bought by Thomas. Soon they bought an apartment and took their time to furnish their little nest. The family idyll did not last long because Thomas felt uncomfortable among his wife's friends. He loved his wife very much, but he was constantly bothered by the feeling that he was out of place. She stayed out more and more often in the evenings, and soon he found out about the cheating. One day the guy came home and found his wife with her lover, whom he had beaten up badly. He felt like a broken toy that had been played with and thrown in the trash. His wife called him a beggar and promised serious trouble, and Thomas packed up and left without explanation. The guy returned to the village, where he planned to dismantle his grandmother's old house and build a new dwelling. He had a little savings, which should be enough to carry out the conceived project. He stayed with a school friend, and one evening he met Amanda. He had always liked her as a girl, but he never dared to confess his love. A couple of exchanges were enough for them to feel a mutual attraction. Later, the beauty admitted that she always looked at Thomas, but was too modest and shy. Her family life also failed, as her husband turned into a drunkard and not minded to beat his wife in a drunken rage. She thanked God that no children had been born in the marriage, for they would not have known happiness with such a father. There were many sad examples of women who had been tormented by alcoholic husbands all their lives. They got married in 3 months, and the neighbors never missed an opportunity to gossip about the young couple. They called him a loser who couldn't prove himself in the city and had to go home. So did Amanda, who was known behind her back as the promiscuous young woman who had abandoned her first husband. Soon, this kind of talk died down, and the couple began to be the envy of many villagers. The couple was building a large house and Thomas bought 2 tractors and rented a large plot of land for farming. He purchased crops, and the first harvest was taken in the fall. The business was expanding and income was steadily increasing, and the family was soon expecting a long-awaited addition. A neatly rounded belly was already visible, and a happy smile never left his pregnant wife's face. Now the boy knew and was sure of exactly what he was dreaming of and what he was living for in his native land.